Microphone.
Collective bargaining impasse hearing at the Board of County Commissioners. We're going to begin with a moment of silent reflection for the first responders. This will be followed by the invocation by Mr. Jeff Smith, and then I will lead the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise.
Our dear Heavenly Father, your word says that when two or more are gathered in your name, you are there also. Lord, we affirm that we're gathered in your name today, and we just ask that with so many things that have happened in recent weeks with mass shootings and Hurricane Dorian displacing so many people in the Bahamas, and just recently, 2 days ago, the 18th anniversary of one of the most atrocious days in American history, that people are hurting all over, and we just ask that reason and civility prevail today. Lord, we ask a special blessing on all the first responders and their families. Bless them, and we thank them for their service. These things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Who asked for a flag to be lit?
I didn't want to crowd Bob. He was leaving.
He starts.
Good afternoon. We're gathered here this afternoon because of an impasse between the collective bargaining agreement between the Indian River County Sheriff's Office and the Indian River County Deputies Association, the IUPA Local 6080. I am now going to ask the County Attorney, Dylan Reingold, to give us a brief introduction and overview of this process. Mr. Reingold.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, Commissioners and those in the audience. As you know, we're here this afternoon for the collective bargaining agreement discussions as referenced by Commissioner Solari. The Sheriff's Office and the union are in the third year of a collective bargaining agreement, and we're negotiating the annual wage reopener in the collective bargaining agreement. An impasse was declared, and a hearing was conducted by a special magistrate. The Sheriff's Office did not accept the recommended decision by the special magistrate. The union did accept the special magistrate's decision. Under Florida law, you are here this afternoon because the legislative body is required to conduct a public hearing at which the parties explain their positions with respect to the rejected recommendations of the special magistrate. The only article at impasse is Article 17, wages. Since the Sheriff's Office did not accept the special magistrate's recommendation, the Sheriff's Office will make their first presentation. That'll be followed by a presentation by the union. The Sheriff's Office will have the opportunity for a rebuttal if time allows, and the union will have an opportunity for a sur-rebuttal limited to the issues raised in the Sheriff's rebuttal if time allows. The parties have agreed that each side will have 30 minutes for their presentations, with the parties having the right to split their time as they see fit. You will have the opportunity to ask questions of both parties. Additionally, the public will be given an opportunity to comment during the public hearing portion. Since the home addresses of active or former sworn law enforcement personnel and the home addresses of spouses and children of such personnel are confidential and exempt from the public records law, we will not ask for that information today. Please keep in mind you are not bound by the agenda format that I have proposed, and I welcome comment on the structure as presented. After the parties have presented their cases and the public has been given an opportunity to speak, then you, as the legislative body, are required to take such action on the rejected recommendations of the special magistrate as you deem to be in the public interest, including the interest of the public employees involved, to resolve the disputed impasse issues. As a reminder of your standard review, I have printed the statutory language for each of you. As has been discussed by the courts, as the legislative body, your role is as the representative of the general public. This requires you to equally consider the positions of the parties in order to arrive at a fair and impartial decision, which is in, quote, the public interest, including the interest of the public employees involved. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and thus, before the parties get started, you should declare any ex parte communications you have had since the installation period began on July 8th, 2019. During the installation period, you are prohibited from having communications with the Sheriff's Office or the union representatives or employees about the merits of this matter. However, you may have had communications with other individuals about the merits of this matter. And then I would like each commissioner to confirm that you have an open mind and are able to take such action as you deem in the public interest, including the interest of the public employees involved, to resolve all the disputed impasse issues. Please keep in mind that the installation period prohibition will continue during any breaks that we take today. And with that, I will turn it over to the chair, except to start the traditional quasi-judicial ex parte communication disclosures.
Thank you very much. I'll first ask if anybody has any ex parte communications to declare. I'll begin with Commissioner Zork.
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, no.
I'll just note that we did have a shade meeting where we discussed it, but that is something everybody knew about. I did ask a couple questions to a couple people about how long they thought this might last and when it was going to occur, but nothing of substance. And I will note that I mentioned the impasse hearing that happened some years ago a couple times, including at least once publicly from this dais. But other than that, I've had no substantive conversations with anybody about the merits of this impasse hearing. Commissioner O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The only thing I received, I think Dylan released it, was the PowerPoint from the union side that we received. Wasn't that bad of a PowerPoint. But no other communication since the quiet period or whatever it was.
Thank you. Commissioner Fletcher.
Mr. Chairman, I speak with deputies on a daily basis, but I don't believe I have discussed this matter, so no.
And I'll ask if you have an open mind and are able to take such action as you deem in the public interest, including the interest of the public employees involved, to resolve all disputed impact issues. Commissioner Fletcher.
I can and will.
Can and will.
Can and will.
Can and will. Well, unplug one down from the end.
Council has the hot mic.
So now I believe we'll swear anybody in who wants to offer testimony. This does obviously exclude the lawyers. So I've asked the clerk to swear everybody in who may want to speak today on matters.
Please raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the whole truth and nothing but the truth?
Thank you very much.
This will happen periodically.
We'll give it 1 minute to try to fix this technical difficulty. Thank you, Jason. And I will note that there's been agreement between the parties that if they want to break it up into a couple sessions so that there's a response after the other party speaks, there'll be one opportunity for that rebuttal. Sheriff's team, please.
Hopefully nothing will happen here. Good afternoon. Chairman Solari, Commissioner Fletcher, Commissioner O'Brien, Commissioner Adams, Commissioner Zork, County Attorney Reingold, Administrator Brown, Ms. Collins-Lister. Thank you all for being here today. I'd like to give you a brief statement about background because I know that you all have been provided with a lot of information that I know you've had the opportunity to review, and we appreciate that. The Sheriff and the union began meetings regarding the 2018-2019 collective bargaining agreement in January of 2018. Subsequent to the Sheriff's budget for the 2018-2019 fiscal year being finalized, the Sheriff provided a proposal to the union in advance of our August 13th, 2018 negotiating session. This proposal was not accepted by the union. In proposals dated August 13th, 2018, the union provided the Sheriff with two different proposals for wages. Those proposals were somewhat contradictory. I will briefly address these proposals as they provide context for the Sheriff's position. One proposal sought to benefit a small number of highly paid employees with disproportionately higher percentage salary increases by moving them to the top of the pay grade. The percentage increases for less than 14 employees was, in most cases, approximately 8.8%. Additionally, this option as presented by the union would not afford the Sheriff sufficient funds within his BOCC approved budget to address pay compression issues as well. The union's first proposal decreased the extremely important starting salary threshold below what the sheriff had proposed. Regarding the second proposal, the union proposed to provide for salary increases in a flat dollar amount to all employees, regardless of tenure. This would have resulted in the same disproportionate increase, but it would be inverse. In other words, the disproportionate impact would now adversely affect those with more longevity. Additionally, the proposal was well outside the budget available to the sheriff as approved by this board. Neither of the proposals provided by the union were acceptable to the sheriff. The parties met again on August 31st and September 24th, 2018. These meetings ended without agreement on wages. The sheriff provided a final proposal on November 2nd, 2018, and the union rejected the proposal at the bargaining session, declining to present it to the membership at large. The union then declared an impasse in writing on December 3rd, 2018. Pursuant to statute, a special magistrate was selected by the parties with a hearing held on April 5th, 2019, to hear the issues between the parties and to provide for a non-binding recommendation to resolve the issues. The board has received a copy of the special magistrate recommendation. For reasons outlined in the sheriff's letter to the board of July 8th, 2019, the recommendations of the special magistrate were rejected by the sheriff. The union has indicated that it accepts the special magistrate's recommendation. They have abandoned their positions as it relates to their initial two offers. Important to note is that the special magistrate recommendation carries with it no binding effect. It carries with it no presumption of correctness, and it is simply a recommendation and reality not relevant to the greater issues here before the board today. Regarding the special magistrate recommendation, within the statutory criteria required to be considered by the special magistrate, as noted in the sheriff's letter of July 8th, 2019, and in the sheriff's accompanying brief, the special magistrate's proposal does not address any of the fundamental issues that are of a primary concern to the sheriff. I'm not going to belabor the recommendations of the special magistrate because I know you have them. I know you've had an opportunity to review them. But I will note this in that regard. The special magistrate agreed with raising the starting salary to $42,000 for new and recently hired employees, as the sheriff had proposed for his deputies hired after April 30th, 2018. However, the magistrate's recommendation largely rejected the sheriff's mechanism for addressing the pay compression, which would result from his recommendation of moving a smaller group of employees to $43,000 and providing for an increase of 4.3% to a larger group of deputies. This 4.3% increase is less than the sheriff's proposal of 5%. Importantly, the recommendations by the special magistrate were not contemplated in the sheriff's budgetary formula as contemplated as a result of the budget that was approved by this board for 2018-2019. The sheriff had a final proposal which provided the opportunity for the union to accept a 5% increase as late in the negotiations as November 2nd, 2018, more than a month after the start of the fiscal year. And I know that you all have a copy of that November 2nd, 2018 proposal, which is important to us today. This particular offer provided for retroactivity if the proposal was ratified by November 30th, 2018. And it was made as an incentive to settle the contract consistent with the agreements entered into by all other unions at the sheriff's office. Since the union did not even present this proposal to its membership for a vote, retroactivity became a non-issue and is non-contemplated by the sheriff here today. To accept the special magistrate's proposal would provide the union, all other unions at the sheriff's office, and in fact, all other unions generally, with little incentive in the future to voluntarily resolve contract issues. This is particularly true when the sheriff's offer of November 2nd, 2018 is certainly fair, it addresses pay compression issues, and it's consistent with other unions' agreements that have already been ratified by the sheriff's office. On Wednesday of this week, we were provided with a PowerPoint presentation by the union, which I believe they will present to you shortly. I will now address that PowerPoint presentation in anticipation of its presentation by the union. The presentation does contain 2 clips from the budget workshop of July 2018. At that workshop, as represented in those clips, it's important to remember that the context of the statements made by the sheriff was in discussing his overall budget request to the board, and his request to have the board approve that budget as submitted. And he noted the following in those clips. When talking about recruitment and retention, he articulated a concern that deputies would be going to Palm Beach and St. Lucie County. He indicated that he was asking for what was not even as much as St. Lucie County. In that regard, that was in the context of the overall budget request. He discussed the men and women of this agency who started at $38,950, that's $38,950, and how that needed to be increased. Note that this is exactly what his proposal, the sheriff's proposal to the union, reflects, and the proposal we're asking for you to approve today. It reflects this. And this could have been done as far back as almost 12 months ago. We would have been at $42,000 for a starting salary if it were not for the impasse declared by the union. The sheriff also noted to the board that day that our agency had men and women who were going to high-paying jobs in surrounding counties. He similarly noted that the dollars are there in the quote. And what in context was referred to was the statement being in relation to the sheriff's request for the board to approve the budget as he had requested. In other words, his reference to the dollars being there referred to the dollars being there for his requested budget in its entirety. And you know, the sheriff's words ring true today as they did back then in regards to resolving this impasse declared by the union and approving the sheriff's November 2nd, 2018 proposal to the union. Of note in their presentation, which I believe they'll show you, is on slide 6, they discuss common themes from the July 11th, 2019 budget workshop. Did talk about recruitment and retention, and we've discussed this related to the video clips that I believe that they will show. We talked about ratification. Ratification last year of the sheriff's proposal on November 2nd, 2018 or before that was designed, would in fact have, and will address issues related to recruitment and retention. Similarly, on slide 6 of the union PowerPoint, they note that the sheriff referred to our agency as the premier agency of the Treasure Coast, as well he should have. Don't let the fact that we are here at Impasse cloud the fact that we do believe that we are the premier agency of the Treasure Coast. And this is because, first and foremost, of my coworkers. It's because of the men and women of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office who put their lives on the line each and every day for all of us. It's because of the sheriff's belief in our employees and the fact that he values each and every employee of this agency. And it's because the sheriff fights every year, as you well know, for his proposed budget in trying to provide the best training, the best equipment that our personnel need. Also on slide 6 of the PowerPoint, you'll see that the union notes that, quote, deputies have not had a basic salary increase in 11 years. That's clearly not true in regards to the context of what we're talking about. That statement could lead to great confusion and could suggest that the sheriff hasn't provided any basic salary increase to anyone in 11 years. In fact, the sheriff has provided for salary increases as a result of his approved budgets by this board since 2012. We all know that during the economic downturn of 2008 and thereafter, the board was not able to provide the sheriff with sufficient funds for salary increases. The sheriff worked diligently with the board to ensure that he had enough money in his budget to not have to lay off any employee of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office during that grievous economic downturn, and that was no small task. Once the economic situation stabilized, the sheriff was able to provide for raises of 3, 3.5, and 5% over a period of the last 6 years. That's over an average of 4% annually. This included an additional base salary increase in 2016 based on an employee's time and position. And this 2016 adjustment, in addition to a base salary increase, resolved the pay compression issue that we were suffering under at the sheriff's office. Now, if the union is referring to starting salary increases, then the sheriff's proposal of November 2nd, 2018 addresses this, because we asked for salary increases. Regarding wage negotiations, I've previously outlined the history of wage negotiations, but I want to point out a reference that the union makes to the sheriff's office declining to go to mediation. Without getting too far into the weeds of Florida Statute 447-403, that statute provides the process for the resolution of impasses between public employers and unions. That's why we're here today. The union declared the impasse in writing on December 3rd, 2018. The statute does provide that the parties may go to mediation. We declined to go to mediation. As you all know, mediation is merely a system where both parties can be present together with a mediator and there's no process for resolution or recommendations or anything. The sheriff wanted to resolve the impasse declared by the union as soon as possible. That was the primary reason to decline mediation. Similarly, the statute provides that parties shall go to a special magistrate unless they agree to go directly to the legislative body. That's this board. The sheriff wanted to dispense with the special magistrate and come directly to the board. In that case, we would have resolved this issue months ago. Keep in mind that the special magistrate recommendation is, as I noted, non-binding. And since the board is the legislative body, you will be the final word on this impasse. And the sheriff wanted to resolve this as soon as possible. In fact, the hearing for the special magistrate didn't even take place until April 15th, and the recommendation is dated June 13th, 2019. Had we dispensed with the special magistrate process and come directly to the decision-making body, this issue would have long been in our history. Regarding the final slide, I want to mention an issue relative to accuracy. They will point out, assuming that they show the slide that they presented, some comparisons of some other agencies in our operational area within our county and the surrounding counties. Regarding the Fort Pierce Police Department, the union presentation indicates that the current starting salary for Fort Pierce Police Department is $44,728. According to the Fort Pierce Police Department job description that can be publicly obtained online, the starting salary is actually $41,748. The $44,728 figure indicates on their own job description that a sworn officer with experience may have that starting salary. Regarding the step plan, the union does not identify what percentage increase is contemplated to get through their pay range in 11 years. And again, this is referencing the slides that I believe that the union will show to you since they presented to them. However, in its current iteration, in the current sheriff's pay grade for deputies, a deputy would reach the top of the pay grade in 12 years with an average of a 4% increase, in 9 years with an average of 5% increase, and in 8 years with an average of a 6% increase. Similarly, as to the Port St. Lucie Police Department presentation, the union presentation, Port St. Lucie Police Department, in the union's presentation, it indicates that PSL/PD officers can expect to move to the top of their pay grade in 15 years. Again, the union does not identify the specific percentage, but we estimate that to be at an average of 4%. The same numbers that I just indicated to you regarding the sheriff's current pay grade hold true. 12 years at an average of 4%, 9 years at an average of 5%, and 8 years at an average of 6%. Regarding Sebastian PD, they do not have a step plan. Their starting salary is $40,608. Regarding Vero Beach Police Department, current starting salary $40,851. The union indicated in their presentation that there is a step plan, but the number of years is not articulated. The same holds true with our pay grade, as I just articulated on a couple of different occasions, regarding when individuals can expect to get to the top of the pay grade. St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office, beginning on October 1st, will have a starting salary of $43,500. They have a step plan that indicates that they would get to the top of their pay grade in approximately 15 years. Again, the same numbers hold true with regard to the agency pay grade to get to the top of our pay grade with those relative average increases of 4, 5, or 6%. And the same thing with Martin County Sheriff's Office, pay grade top out in roughly 11 years. As we stand here today, our employees would have been in a much better position for recruiting and retention right now in 2019 in relation to all of these other agencies. And as we move forward in negotiations for the 19 and 20 budget, where the sheriff will seek to increase wages, increase starting salaries, and increase the top out of the pay range had the sheriff's offer been accepted in 2018, more than a year ago. As you know, the sheriff is an independent constitutional officer. The sheriff is provided a budget by this board. The sheriff distributes his budget in a manner which is appropriate in the administration of his independent constitutional office. You have a copy of the sheriff's proposal dated November 2nd, 2018. This proposal by the sheriff to increase the starting salary and to provide salary increases to avoid pay compression, to provide for a 5% salary increase, and to provide for lump sum payments for personnel already at the top of their pay grade is consistent with the increases already agreed to by other unions at our agency. It's consistent with the increases for non-union employees, including county employees. And importantly, it is fair and completely consistent with the sheriff's responsibilities as an independent constitutional officer, that being the sheriff of Indian River County. Additionally, as to and consistent with the standard of review required by Florida statute, this proposal serves the public interest in allowing the sheriff to adequately recruit and retain the best personnel possible. It serves the interest of the public employees, the sheriff's employees, by increasing the starting salary of those currently employed here and providing for lump sum payment to the top of the pay range, and that salary increase being 5%. I usually get an applaud when I say this when I'm speaking. In closing, it's just a little levity to ease the tension. Thank you, Commissioner. I know you got it.
You were correct, just a little.
I know you got it.
Gives us hope.
So on behalf of Sheriff Lohr, the sheriff requests that this board resolve the impasse by voting to accept the sheriff's wage offer dated November 2nd, 2018, as presented and without retroactivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Harpering. We will now hear from,
If I may interject, sir. Mr. Harper, I just want to let you know you went about 18:45, so you've got about 11 and 15 change for your rebuttal.
and if you would, sir, and anybody speaking for the union, just give us your name before you start speaking for the record.
Yes, sir, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, honorable commissioners. My name is Ryan Burton. I am the Associate General Counsel for the International Union of Police Associations. I have had the pleasure of representing the law enforcement deputies of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office for the past 6 years. You just heard a brief history of the issue at impasse as well as the Sheriff's Office position. But what I would like to do is shed some light and clarity on the real reason why we are here today. After my brief introduction, I'm going to hand the reins over to Deputy Kathy Gibson and Detective Joe Carmen. Deputy Gibson is the Secretary-Treasurer for the Indian River County Deputies Association, and Detective Carmen is the President. But more importantly, they are members of this bargaining unit. They are deputies who serve this community every single day. Like all members of the board of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, they are elected by their peers to represent them and to bargain for them collectively. Most importantly, however, Deputy Gibson and Detective Carmen are tasked with being the information conduit between the sheriff and the employees, the deputies of the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. However, today what we hope to be is that information conduit between those employees and you. To this end, the law enforcement deputies come before you and pray for your assistance. We are faced with a retention epidemic here at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, and I do not say that lightly. Highly trained, experienced deputies are leaving this agency by the droves. This not only puts added pressure on the men and women who are still patrolling the streets, but it puts the very safety of this community at risk. Now, from the outside, it may seem like the parties' positions on this issue are aligned, that both parties want retention and they both want to be able to recruit. However, if you look at the proposals clearly, you will see that they are not aligned. And hopefully, as we go through this presentation, you'll get that clarity that I promised at the outset. The association, and again, as representatives of the employees that they represent, have asked for only one thing throughout the negotiations, and that is fairness. Specifically, there are 15 deputies in this bargaining unit who have served this community for at least 20 years and are not at the top of the pay scale. I want to take a second to let that sink in. And I'm going to restate it so we all understand what I'm talking about. There are 15 deputies of approximately 150 who have served with honor and sacrifice for this community for no less than 20 years and are not at the top of the pay scale. It was presented earlier that if they received pay increases of 4% or 5%, they could get there in 9 years or 12 years. The question then is why? Why is someone who has served for at least 20 years not at the pay scale? That's the problem that we're talking about. This issue is an utter tragedy. And the message that it sends is really the problem, and it's the crux of what we're talking about today. And the message is that their service is not appreciated, that they cannot be brought to the top of the pay scale. That's the only thing we've asked for from the very beginning. The only thing. That message is what the association is here to do, to bring it to you, to ask for your assistance, and it is that message that you, commissioners, have the opportunity today to change. But if I've learned anything in representing these law enforcement officers, as well as numerous and countless others throughout the state of Florida, it is that there is no better proponent and advocate for their own position than themselves. And so with that, I'm going to hand this over to Deputy Kathy Gibson and let her provide that clarity that I presented to you. And I would like to thank you ahead of time for your time and consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. If you would, just your name for the record.
Deputy Catherine Gibson.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Honorable Commissioners. I'm Catherine Gibson. I'm a deputy with the Indian River County Sheriff's Office and the Secretary-Treasurer of the Indian River Deputies Association. There are 3 videos that we wish to play.
Stephanie? These commissioners we shared with you before. The theme of this particular budget hearing is retention and recruiting. When we have deputy sheriffs that are leaving to go to other agencies for more money, that is an issue. We're simply at $38,950. This proposal increases the starting salary for a deputy sheriff to make it more compatible with the likes of St. Lucie County. So that's something to be considered. The deputy sheriff's pay has not changed in 11 years. Something very, very interesting to think about. And it's got to do with retention and recruiting. It simply does. So next. Stephanie? These recruiting and retention. You're talking about having deputies that are not going to Palm Beach County, that are not going to St. Lucie County. And what I'm asking for isn't even as much as St. Lucie County. But we are Indian River County. We are the place people want to be. But our public safety, to some extent, is not recognized that way. In fact, the premier agency in this county, those men and women that start at $38,950 need to be increased. We need the retention process to continue. Absent the retention, what do we have? We have young deputy sheriffs going to high-paying jobs in surrounding counties. And here we are training them again and encourage them to do the right thing. By the way, we start at $38,950. You know, the dollars are there, and I think it's disingenuous to talk about raising taxes.
First, let me start by apologizing for you all having to even be here today. To date, we have followed every letter of the law and the entire due process afforded to the bargaining unit in Florida. We had hoped by taking this to an independent special magistrate, an expert in his field, to obtain a fair and impartial recommendation, this would have resolved prior to today. We are here because of equality and fairness. We understand that there is a recruitment issue in regards to our starting salary, which has been stagnant for many years. But the same recruitment issue in regards to our starting salary is also due to our top-out salary. Many new recruits are not only looking at the starting salary, but they are looking where they'll end up when their careers become to retirement. However, under the Sheriff's Office proposal, that would raise the starting salary to $42,000 and give other deputies above $42,000 a 5% raise, does nothing more than recruit new deputies on the backs of the loyal and dedicated deputies that have been here for years. We have approximately 15 deputies that have 20 plus years of service with the Sheriff's Office who have dedicated their lives to Indian River County and are currently 5.6 to 8.8% away from the top out of pay. If they were employed at any other agency in this county or the surrounding counties, they would have reached that top amount years ago. We are losing deputies at an alarming rate to other agencies. We are becoming a training ground. Deputies are coming here to obtain the required experience, to be hired by another agency that has a better pay scale, step plan, and the ability to reach the top in a shorter period. Make no mistake, we are in a recruitment and retention crisis. Historically, the Sheriff's Office has always proposed raises that are equal across the board, with the exception of the fiscal year 2016-2017. That year, raises were dependent on the years of service as to what additional monies you would get above the 3.5% increase. This was done to fix the compression issue. Then came last year. The 2018-2019 wage proposal offered by the Sheriff's Office is being relayed as a 5% across the board. However, it is actually a 7.8, 9.1, 3.9, and 5% raise, depending on where you fall in the proposal. You will notice under the Sheriff's Office proposal, the deputies that were hired between May 1st, 2016 and April 30th, 2017 would only receive a 3.9% raise. Both of our counter proposals were keeping with the equality in regards to raises. Counter proposal 1 did afford the starting salary increase to $41,000, which is approximately a 5.2% raise. The deputies below that number would be increased to $41,500. All the other deputies would receive a 5% raise, and the deputies that had 20 plus years with the agency would be moved to the top out at $63,151. That was declined at the next negotiation, and is being relayed to all that it was declined because, quote, unfairly favoring those more senior bargaining unit employees at the expense of those at the lower end, and because it did not give the Sheriff's Office the starting salary of $42,000. Counter proposal 2 was that other than the newest deputies slated to receive $3,050, all deputies would receive $3,550 raise. Proposal 2 was declined at the same negotiations, and it is being relayed to all that it was declined because it was, quote, far costlier than the sheriff's proposal and inconsistent with the dollars that have been allocated to the sheriff by the county commission for salary increase. As a, quote, flat amount increase versus a percentage, it disproportionately favored newer employees at the expense of the more senior deputies. Now let's think about that for a minute. They did not accept our counter proposal 1 because it favored the senior deputies, and 2 because it favored the newer deputies. But if you look at the proposal numbers, it favors the newest deputies. and it does so at the expense of the 2 or more year deputies, and especially the senior deputies. This reasoning seems very hypocritical. The sheriff's office was only willing to present their offer as originally proposed. After providing the Indian River Deputies Association with all available materials to make an informed decision, the sheriff's office proposal was sent for ratification on September 19, 2018. Their proposal was not ratified, passed. We notified the sheriff's office that their proposal was not ratified, and no other proposal was received until November 2nd, 2018. On that date, the sheriff's office gave us the exact same proposal as before. That was rejected by the association, but with one adjustment. They were now giving us a deadline of November 30th, 2018 to accept the proposal or lose retroactivity pay. This is money that we all know they had already received in their sheriff's office budget. To not only order retroactive pay would raise several questions. If we do not get issued the retroactive pay, then where is the money going to go? Will it be returned to you, the county? Or will it be squandered in a fire sale prior to the end of the fiscal year? The sheriff's office proposal to eliminate retroactivity can only be viewed as retaliation for the employees exercising their rights to collectively bargain. There has been no legitimate reason offered by the sheriff's office to remove retroactivity other than to punish the employees. This is not my opinion, but a fact that the sheriff offers himself in his own brief to both the special magistrate and to you, the commissioners, when he states, quote, ultimately, the sheriff gave the union a proposal that was designed to encourage the bargaining unit members to either accept it or face economic consequences. This is the definition of a bully tactic. And why? Because we chose to exercise our rights under law? I would hope this kind of strong-arm tactic would not be condoned or allowed by the commission, as it would be a tantamount to endorsing the sheriff's office retaliatory conduct. On April 5th, 2019, the special magistrate hearing was held. Magistrate Campana heard testimony from both sides. Afterwards, he took into account the evidence and testimony presented and issued his recommendation. After reviewing what I feel was a fair compromise to both sides, the special magistrate's recommendation was given to the Indian River Deputies Association for review. On June 26, 2019, the recommendation was put to a vote to either accept or reject. After an overwhelming turnout of 111 deputies, the Indian River Deputies Association, by a large majority, voted to accept the recommendation by a vote of 90 in favor, 8 against, and 13 with a split decision. Now, understanding a majority of the deputies that voted are in the group slated to receive the 4.3%. These deputies selflessly chose to forego their 0.7% or approximately $14 to $16 before taxes each paycheck in order to move the deputies with 20 plus years to the top of the pay scale. The result of this vote was relayed to the sheriff's office. It was later learned that the sheriff's office rejected Magistrate Campagne's recommendation. Why is that? The sheriff's office stated it's because even though the special magistrate raised the starting salary to $42, he largely rejected the sheriff's mechanism for dealing with the resulting compression problem that would be created. Well, in reviewing the sheriff's brief to the commission dated July 18, 2019, on page 3, of 4, he addresses the reason for rejecting the special magistrate's recommendation. Under the reason given in his first paragraph, section 1, line 7, that, quote, the special magistrate rejects the sheriff's proposal to raise the salary of those existing deputies hired after April 30th, 2017 from $38,950 to $42,500. Instead, recommending that their salaries be raised by the lower amount of $4.3. This stating that the special magistrate did not adequately address the compression issue for the compression issue existing employees at the lower end of the pay scale. However, if you look at the recommendation of the special magistrate and turn to page 7, you will discover that on recommendation number 3, he addresses this group specifically. In doing so, he states that, quote, should these calculations produce a result that is less than 43, any such deputy so affected shall have his or her base salary adjusted to $43,000 with any balance given to such deputy in a lump sum fashion. That would actually give that group an additional $500 over what the sheriff is proposing. It also is obvious that the reason for the sheriff's office rejecting the special magistrate's recommendation is no longer valid. As for section 2 of the rejection, the sheriff states that the special magistrate's recommendation retroactive pay to the first full pay period of October 2018. He rejects that because he gave us the opportunity to accept raises back in November 2018 as an incentive to settle the contract. He further states to accept the special magistrate's recommendation in this regard would be to give the union and all other unions at the sheriff's office little incentive in the future to voluntarily resolve contract issues. Well, the sheriff is again saying that we were being punished for exercising our rights to collective bargain. Also, the sheriff's office has had the opportunity to resolve this issue by further negotiating and not dictating. They could have not declined mediation, or they simply could have just accepted the special magistrate's recommendation. The only time prior to today that we stood before you for an impasse was in 2009 in regards to our shifts being moved from 12 hours to 10 hours. Every year we negotiate with the sheriff's office in good faith to include last year. His statement is clear that he wants all bargaining units at the sheriff's office to accept his proposals without question or face retaliation and punishment. As for section 3, which is located at the top of the page 4, the sheriff speaks about the multiple deputies at the top of the pay range be given as much as 8.8% pay increase, funded by a reduction in the 5% increase offered to the majority of remaining bargaining unit members. He speaks specifically about the special magistrate's recommendation of 4.3%, being less than all other employees at the sheriff, and less than 5% received by the employees of the Indian River County and all the employees of its constitutional officers. He's then stated he is willing to reduce the 5% offered. He then states he is unwilling to reduce the 5% offer to the majority in order to fund a larger increase for a relatively few deputies at the top of the range. There are several issues with this. The sheriff's office doesn't have an unwillingness to give deputies at the bottom of the range 7.8 or 9.1% raise, or the deputies hired between May 2016 and April 2017, a 3.9% raise. That is clearly under the 5%. But because it is for brand new deputies and it is in the name of recruiting, it must be okay. I cannot say it enough that the deputies at the top of the range that we are talking about have 20 plus years experience. They have 20-plus years of service to the Indian River County Sheriff's Office and to the citizens of Indian River County. For their dedication to this job and their loyalty to the Sheriff's Office, they should be recognized and rewarded by allowing them to reach the top of their range before they are eligible to retire at 25 years. Sadly, as an example, we have a deputy that is currently employed with the Sheriff's Office that is 5.6% away from reaching his top out range. He began his career on September 20th, 1993, and in 6 days will begin his 26 years, and he is still not topped out. All of the sheriff's statements in regards to why he rejected the special magistrate's recommendation are contradictory. Another reason why you should accept the special magistrate's recommendation as it was authored is because it is cost neutral to the county and operates within the existing budget allotted by the sheriff's office for their original proposal. The special magistrate's recommendation will not cost Indian River County or the taxpayers any additional funds. I implore you to vote I implore you not to vote for or against the sheriff's office, but instead vote for the special magistrate's recommendation. As he was an impartial party who took careful consideration to render a decision that was a compromise for both parties. His recommendation was not only fair, but equitable. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anybody else from the union? Name for the record, please.
Joseph Carmen, detective with the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. Good afternoon, honorable lady and gentlemen. I'm Detective Joe Carmen, background investigator for the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, and recently elected president of the Indian River Deputies Association, a decision which was not easy. You see, I'm not a politician, but after long discussions with my beautiful wife, who I thank wholeheartedly for her support, we made that decision together. Why, you ask? Because I wanted to make sure that after my 28 years of service to the Indian River County Sheriff's Office, that the 150 deputies, their spouses, and their children had a voice in an attempt to make the Indian River County Sheriff's Office the premier agency on the Treasure Coast again. I apologize for standing in front of you today. It definitely was not my intention for us to have reached this point, but due to statutory requirements, here we are. One of my implied functions as a background investigator with the Sheriff's Office is attempting to recruit new deputies at our surrounding police academy classes. Commissioner Fletcher, you can relate as a former recruiter for the Sheriff's Office. Since October of last year, we have lost 17 deputies to resignations. We currently have 28 law enforcement openings, which does not include the corrections side of our agency. This number also does not include the deputies that we know that are presently exploring other employment opportunities outside of the Sheriff's Office. The current academy class had 19 students who started with no sponsorships from any of the surrounding agencies. After speaking with them, we have only received one completed application. That individual has refrained from proceeding with the application process at the Indian River County Sheriff's Office pending the outcome of today's hearing. As you can see by the last slide in the PowerPoint that I have up now, which is an accurate representation of the surrounding agencies' pay scales, and I can correct that the Fort Pierce Police Department, you can look, they have contracted, that is the actual starting salary for the Fort Pierce Police Department now. We are still way behind the 8 ball in the area of competitive or comparable salaries for agencies around us. As indicated by Magistrate's Campana recommendation, we are the lowest paid agency on the Treasure Coast, only excluding the Fellsmere Police Department. His recommendations do not fix the problem by any means. However, it does at least get the ball rolling in the right direction. Magistrate Campana's recommendation recognizes that the retention of deputies is top priority, and the number of deputies departing should be a cause for concern. In closing, I again apologize for any inconvenience this matter has presented you. I ask you to weigh in the factor that Magistrate Campana was presented a case as an independent expert neutral to both parties who made a recommendation that satisfied all statutory requirements, that operated within the budget guidelines that had already been approved by this county commission, and is in the best interest and welfare to the public. The Indian River Deputies Association understands that the last thing the Board of County Commissioners want to do is tell a constitutional officer how to spend their money. However, as you can see by overwhelming evidence presented today, that Magistrates Campana's recommendation is the only feasible way to attract, recruit, and retain qualified deputies in Indian River County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And Mr.
Real quickly, just from my point of view, y'all can quit apologizing. I don't think anybody up here feels you've done anything wrong. As you mentioned, you're certainly following the rights that are provided to you through the law. And, you know, this is what we do. We're here, you know, for these things. So y'all can just quit apologizing. I see no need for it.
Mr. Burton, I just want to let you know that your team was talking for 27 minutes and 43 seconds, so you have approximately 2 minutes and 15 seconds for any sort of rebuttal you wish to have.
And I'll now ask Mr. Harper if he has any rebuttal. And I ask you to keep the rebuttal to what the union has actually said.
Yes, sir. Thank you again. Two items. First, regarding the charge of retaliatory conduct, that's flatly untrue. It's completely lawful, as case law provides. Case law is replete with examples and decisions that the sheriff's proposal of November 2nd, 2018 is completely lawful. If it were not, an unfair labor practice claim could have been filed, and it was not. It's merely good negotiations and being a good steward of the taxpayer dollars. Secondly, one thing that is not been acknowledged but was talked about regarding the top-out. This board must know and must remember that beginning in 2008 at the economic downturn through the 2012 budget, not until the 2013 budget, was the sheriff afforded sufficient funds to provide for salary increases. The sheriff worked very closely with this board over each of those years, and the primary goal was to avoid laying people off. And in that regard, that is why those very small number of deputies are not topped out. You also have to look historically, if you're talking about 20 years ago, what the start was, what the salary increases were. But not to quibble about that, the reality is that during those 5 years, had we even had a modicum of the ability to increase salaries, say at 2.5% or 3% during those 5 years, then each of those individuals to which the union refers would have been topped out right now. With that, I again ask you to vote to accept the sheriff's proposal of November 2nd, 2018 in its entirety without retroactivity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll ask the union if there's any rebuttal to what Mr. Harper has just said.
Just quickly, Mr. Harpering, made the point that, it's lawful. We haven't made the claim that it's unlawful. We haven't made the claim that it's an unfair labor practice. If it was, we would have filed that. My question is it right? Again, I want to read the quote that came from the memo issued by the sheriff's office, where it says, ultimately the sheriff gave the union a proposal that was designed to encourage the bargaining unit members to either accept it or face economic consequences. My question is that right? Is that the message we want to send, that you either accept it or face the consequences? Because to me, that sounds like a strong-arm tactic. And again, my question is that right? Is that the message we want to send? I don't think so. I hope not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll now ask if there's anybody on the board who'd like to ask the sheriff's side any questions about his presentation.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Fletcher.
I'd like to ask Chief Harpering a few, if I could.
Yes, sir.
Chief, you said that the special magistrate's decision was simply a recommendation, correct?
Yes, it is. Actually, it absolutely is. It's non-binding.
And you also stated that the sheriff is an independent constitutional officer. He can make his own decisions, correct?
I did.
Okay. So, the sheriff rejected the initial offering based on, the number one objection was, as I see it on the record, is compression. And you know, we're working for the greater good of the people. I know what salary compression is, and yes, and thank you, Joe, I did recruit for the agency, and we were able to bring a whole lot more than you could now, because we had a whole different world. It was much more interesting to come to the agency, and the salaries were enticing. But Chief, could you explain the dilemma on salary compression so that the public understands it? So I mean, because that seems to be one of the largest sticking points as to, you know, two deputies responding and making different salaries because they started a little earlier.
Yes.
Could you clarify it?
I will do that by using the example I used in my very brief rebuttal, which has to do with the fact that the agency did not have salary increases beginning in the 2008-2009 budget. So let's just say, for example, you hire someone, and I'm just using round figures to make it easy for me. You hire someone at $10,000 on year one. There are no salary increases for that person or the person hired on year 2, 3, or 4. In year 5, you increase the starting salary to $200, and you provide some commensurate salary increase. That means that the person that had been at the agency for 5 years is making the same as the person that had been at the agency for 1 year. That's the best way I can explain pay compression.
That's fair. But that was the largest sticking point for the sheriff's office for the negotiation to accept or decline that offering, correct?
One of them, yes, sir.
That was number one. I would say that that's the most important when it's number one, right?
I mean, are you saying that, or are you asking me a question?
Well, yeah, I am asking a question because it says it's the number one objection.
Yes,
we point out number one, so I think that
We
always
all the
point out the
documents.
most important first, and then we decline thereafter, correct? No? Generally?
We stand by all the statements that we made in the submissions, and I don't know that necessarily the order of addressing something necessarily reflects its importance. All of those things are equally important because they have an interchangeable effect as we look at what the proposal is, whether it's reducing the salary increase to 4.3%, that's an issue. Whether it's moving people to 43 instead of 42, that's an issue. In the sheriff's proposal, we moved them the starting to 42, and then we moved those people that would be affected by pay compression to 42.5.
Okay. And then a little later on, you stated that we were going to see a slide that stated that there was no change in salaries for 11 years with the sheriff's office.
I was referring to the presentation, and you did see that where
And
they
you said that
had a statement that said there was no
going to be
base salary increase for 11 years.
and there was changes, correct?
Well,
There was
during the-
increases.
Absolutely. I provided all that information to the board. I indicated that starting
On
in
the average of-
2000, the average was 4%. It was 3.5. We had the second year where in 2016 where we addressed pay compression in addition to a base salary increase. Depending on how long you had been at the agency, you received an additional increase to your base salary, and then 5% 2 years ago and 5% last year.
I'm just trying to sort out the facts. This is not, you know, one side or the other, but I saw on the video that I heard the sheriff's voice say that there had not been a raise for 11 years.
He was referring to the base salary increase of $38,950. Not a salary increase to the employees, but the increase to the starting salary of $38,950 for a newly hired employee.
Well,
And I did point out that that was the context in which you had to look at that.
Maybe I misconstrued that. I apologize then. But it sure sounded like there was no raise.
Well, this board would know that since the 2013 budget, when we came out of the recession, we've provided for 3, 3.5, and multiple 5% years to include 2016, which included the time in position compression increase.
On the top end of, on the last note of the special magistrate's recommendation, I see the top pay grade bump up from 63,151 to 65,867. Could we assume that that's, how many deputies?
Well, at a minimum, it's the 14, excuse me, it would be the number of deputies that are currently topped out, and then it would be presumably those number of deputies who would be topped out or within 4.3% if you accept the special magistrate's math.
So that, well, we don't know if it's Common Core or not, but it's 15 deputies?
I think it's 14 now, but I'd have to go
14?
back and look.
One left? Because I know 3 left last week. All right, so 14, could I assume that that's about $4,000 a deputy?
I'm not going to estimate the math. If you want to assume that, that's
just
fine. I'm not going to
generalize?
estimate the math.
It's-
I'm not going to estimate the math, Commissioner.
No, sir, we're not going to have rebuttals to.
Yeah, no, I'll ask separately,
Not a
separately. So, because I'm looking at it, it's, at the top, it's about $60,000 on that sticking point on the last item, right?
Is there a question there, sir? I just want to make sure I'm answering
To
your question.
retain the institutional knowledge and the valuable veterans to the agency. It appears to be about $60,000, no?
What? Honestly, Commissioner, I don't understand what you're saying.
It appears to be about $60,000 for that top-end retention for the valuable veterans and for the, those individuals who have served a rather lengthy period of time for the sheriff's office, the ones that we tend to lose.
If you're talking about the actual number to get them to a particular top-out, I'll accept your math, but I will suggest this, that the sheriff does not look at this in a vacuum. He can't. He's not just looking at the deputy sheriffs and law enforcement. He has to look at the roughly 500 employees that he has. He's not just looking at this in a vacuum when he's dealing with a budget in its entirety.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
We may have other time.
Thank you. Any questions of the union side? Any questions of the union side?
Yes, I believe, I asked a question that might have promoted discussion, and I saw that Mr. Carmen wanted to answer, and this would be his opportunity. I believe that was the question on the top-out.
Commissioner Fletcher, I'm not trying to rebut anything.
And it's not a rebuttal.
On the
I just-
magistrate's ruling, that would have only affected 4 of those deputies to move from the 63 to the new 65.8 figure. The 14 deputies or 15 deputies that were 20 and over would go to the existing top out of 63,151. Only 4 existing deputies that we currently have at that top scale at 63,151, his recommendation is they would move to the new 65.8. Just for clarification on that, sir.
Okay, and I don't think we have anything else. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions of the union? If not, then I'm going to open up this to the public. Would anybody from the public like to speak on this issue? Thank you. Come on up. Name for the record?
Roy Raymond, former sheriff of Indian River County Sheriff's Department. I had put together a little bit of a presentation, but I can see it's wearing thin, and so I'm going to keep it brief. Several days ago, I had received a request from several deputies to if I would be willing to look at this procedure today and look at the presentation documents and just to evaluate it with my experience. I've got 20 years in administration with this department, 12 as the undersheriff and 8 as the sheriff. And I did that. And a few things that did come out that really bother me. First of all, I would support and accept the special magistrate's recommendation. I don't think it's off the wall. I don't think that it's a situation where we're looking at $1 million where the county commission should really be concerned about the amount of impact to the citizens and taxpayers of this county. One of the things that concerns me is that when I was elected sheriff, I inherited a real problem with salaries and benefits. And we immediately began taking that on, and we discovered real quick that it was so complex that it was above my capability and my comptroller's capability. So we took some special funds and we hired a consultant who specialized in law enforcement and governmental budgets. And we did a comprehensive salary and benefits study. And at the completion of that study, we put it together in our upcoming budget and presented it to the county commissioner. I noticed that County Commissioner Tom Lowther, former commissioner, was sitting back there. When we came in with that budget, it was significant. It had a great impact on the amount of money in my budget in order to make things right and have us competitive with other departments. In the time that we were doing this and my presentation, Commissioner Lowther kind of led the charge, stuck his neck out, and pushed for us to get that salary benefit plan through, and it did pass the county commission. When that plan was enacted, it was designed to carry on for years. It had to be tweaked a little bit here and there as the years went on, but it would keep the department competitive, and it would not be a high impact on the taxpayer as it went forward. When I retired in 2009, that plan was still in effect. It was still solid. And in the beginning, I've heard it mentioned about being the lowest paid department on the Treasure Coast. During our study, we found that we were the lowest paid department, and this was back in the beginning of my first term. We found that we were the lowest paid department in the 5-county area with the exception of Fellsmere PD. Here we are 10 years after I retire, and we're right back down in that same position. And if you move it back to the beginning of time that we implemented that program, we're back right where we started 18 years ago. Something happened in there. I don't know what it was. I don't know whether it was mismanaged or what it was, but it's a fact. We have dropped right down to the same point that we started at, and that concerns me. The other thing that I'd like to bring out is that the department unionized under my administration, and I was bitterly opposed to it. We had done this pay plan. We had done a lot of things for the department. We gave them a career service bill, and here they are unionizing, and I took it personally. Well, I had a bunch of the deputies come to me and they said, "Sheriff, it's not you that we're doing this for. We know that you're going to retire probably after the next term, but we're going to still be here and we need some protection." So for the next couple of years, I dealt with the union with my budgets and other issues. And I found that as long as they're treated fairly, that they will give you the respect that you deserve and treat fairly back. I do agree with the statement that was made about bullying when it comes down to the point that you make a statement that either you do it my way or you'll suffer. That's not bullying, that's extortion. Let's call it what it is. It's extortion. And the other thing that I may not, I don't know whether I'm supposed to say this or whether I should say that, but I saw one of the most unethical things today that I think I've ever seen. and that was done by Jim Harpering. The PowerPoint presentation that the union put together did not have to be released by law to the county or to the sheriff's office and their attorneys. They were protected by law. They could have done that. But I know for a fact, in good faith, they released that. And for the sheriff's office to take that presentation that they had worked so hard on and shoot holes in it before you had a chance to hear that presentation, I think is unconscionable. I can't tell you how much I hope that you will look at your conscience, look at the reality of this thing, and go with that magistrate's recommendation. I think it's good for the county. I think it's good for the department. They are losing people right and left, I know. My daughter works for St. Lucie County Sheriff's Office. They've lost several deputies to St. Lucie County just in the last year or so. So please take it into deep consideration before you take your vote. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public wish to speak? Name for the record, please.
Chuck Kirby, Chairman Solari. Do you need the address for me, sir?
I do not.
Okay. I'll be brief. Obviously, everybody's had all the briefs on this thing coming in. The magistrates made a decision, which I think is fair in looking at this thing. I've attended each one of the collective bargaining meetings with the union as they've done this thing. I attended the special magistrate session, as well as the budget hearing and supporting Sheriff Lohr in asking for his entire budget in the last budget cycle. However, I think the thing that I want you guys to realize, or at least everybody in the room to realize, is that there's consequences to this that are beyond retention and recruiting. Although those are very important and they're extremely significant items, you have to look at our community. If you look at our community, and I agree, I think that our employees are the premier officers in this county. However, and on the Treasure Coast, the problem is that we have a lack of experience. The problem is because of the retention issue, we have lost so many deputies in the last period of years, basically, that are going out. When I left the sheriff's office as a captain and retired a little over a year ago, the uniform division, the average time on the job was 85% was less than 5 years. To my understanding, as of right now, I think that 68% of those guys are less than 3 years. There is a significant difference between a 3-year deputy and a 20-year deputy, or a 15-year deputy, or a 10-year deputy. That experience level turns around and equates back into clearance rates and crime rates in our community, our ability to do the job because of those guys' experience and institutional knowledge and ability to train the guys behind them. With that gap in there, if you look at our crime rate in this county as compared to the rest of the Treasure Coast, just from sheriff's offices, which is fair, this year we had the highest crime rate and the lowest clearance rate. That's an effect. Now, like I say, we can argue whether or not that's because of seniority. I believe that it is, or the fact that we're losing people. And this isn't a one-year deal. If you look at last year, same thing with the FDLE statistics. Our crime rate, higher than any other sheriff's office on the Treasure Coast. Our clearance rate, lower than any other sheriff's office on the Treasure Coast. You can go back 10 years. If we go back 10 years, we're in that same situation. 6 of those years, we've had the highest crime rate of any sheriff's office on the Treasure Coast. And 8 of those 10 years, we've had the lowest clearance rates. That's an effect as we look at that stuff. So as you deliberate and make your decision, I'm not going to belabor the other pieces, but understand that at the sheriff's office, on both sides, in human resources and at the uniform division. The uniform division, there's a line right now, and guys are stepping up to that line. I think that Commissioner Flesher spoke well. Three deputies left last week. And looking at that, those guys were walking up that line and they're looking, do I stay or do I go? Now, that's not every day. And I think that there's a lot of pride in this agency. I spent more than a quarter of a century, worked for 4 sheriffs here, 2 of them sitting in the room. As those guys look at it, every day they have to look and decide, am I going to stay or am I going to take that offer to go to Martin County, which pays significantly more, St. Lucie County that pays more, any of the other agencies that are above us, not at the starting pay. And what's happening is those guys are making that decision. Now, maybe not every day they're walking up to that line, but tomorrow they're going to look at your decision. And they're going to say, did the county commission say yes or did they say no? Did they support it? Did they give us the 5% or did they side with the sheriff's council and say, no, it's not the right, it wasn't a legal thing that we didn't have to do it. So at the end of the day, there is a consequence to this. Right now, as the recruiter said, he said, they've had one applicant that basically doesn't want to go any further. The problem is that that's another decision. These guys all talk to each other. Every sheriff's office, every police department needs officers. Everybody needs people. And when you go down that academy, you talk to those folks, they're not looking to come to the Indian River County Sheriff's Office. And to think that we're going to be able to recruit or retain the highest quality people that we really need in order to bring those crime rates down and clearance rates up, we're going to need your help to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this? Anyone else from the public? One second, there's another person from the public. We'll wait till after he's spoken. Wait till all the public has spoken. Oh, I understand that. Name for the record, please.
Greg Stanley. And I'm currently a deputy here in Indian River County, so I'll not give my address if that's okay.
No, I didn't ask for it.
Okay, thank you. So it's difficult for me to be up here today speaking out, but I do feel strongly enough about this issue to speak out. We're here asking for your help, and we're asking for what's fair. We're not here on a matter of greed. We're not trying to get some huge sum of money. Far from it, we're asking for the fairness, and that's it. Every day we put that uniform on, that's what's demanded of us, is fairness in everything that we do out there on the streets. As you've seen from the previous charts, what was offered was heavily skewed in favor of newly hired deputies. Even worse to me, it was set to reward some people that haven't even been employed here yet. But the people that have worked hard to protect our community day in and day out, that have shown loyalty to the agency and the community, were offered less. We've been left feeling undervalued, unimportant, and unrecognized for our service. In addition to feeling undervalued, the proposal offered to us would only continue to worsen the longstanding issue of pay compression within our ranks. The sheriff's proposal would serve to close the gap between the bottom and the top of the advertised pay scale, which is the very definition of the word compression. The only other item that we've asked for, which we've asked for each and every year for the past 6 years that I'm aware of, is that any deputy who has worked here for 20 years or more be moved to the top of the pay scale. 20 years. That's the measure of a career by most people's standards. We can't even get to the top of the pay scale. The attorney representing the sheriff filed a brief that was presented to the special magistrate. In that brief, under section 4C, which was titled "The Interest and Welfare of the Public," referring to our request to top out 20-year or more deputies, states, and I quote, "singling out a select few deputies to receive substantially greater increases than every other employee in the sheriff's office, and indeed the entire county, is a recipe for breeding jealousy and discontent. It will not serve the interests and welfare of the public to create such divisiveness." This is exactly what the sheriff's proposal has done, but in reverse. I assure you that the proposal has served to offend every single tenured deputy that's employed here. I strongly believe that anyone who has worked here for 20 years or more has earned the right to be at the top of the pay scale. Equally disturbing to me is, as a result of this dispute, the sheriff has asked for any retro money to be taken from us. The justification behind taking this money away from us has been punishment. We don't need any more punishment. This process and holding up these funds for the past year has been punishment enough. I thank you for the opportunity to express my feelings on this issue. And what was really interesting to me before I came up and spoke, because I wrote my speech independent of the other deputies you've heard from, is that everything I just said was already said. I almost didn't come up, but it helped validate for me the stuff that I feel is accurate and represents that of our deputies. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public? Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this matter?
You want to?
If not, I'll get to Mr. Harping after all the public. So, Mr. Harping, you may ask the attorney a question, but no editorials, please.
It had nothing to do with the subject or the topics, but I'd ask that Attorney Reingold clarify publicly the process regarding the submission of the presentations and his request regarding the submission of the presentations and the timing and the disclosure of those presentations, because I was called out by name
That's fine.
and accused of doing something unethical
We'll allow the question.
when somebody calls me unethical.
We'll allow the,
And I'd appreciate that Mr. Reingold clarify that that was appropriate.
Mr. Reingold.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I was going to comment, but I want to at least allow for the public comment. Mr. and former Sheriff Raymond, if anyone done anything unethical, it was me. I will explain to you what had happened. I had asked for both sides to present documents to me as part of a final agenda package that would be provided to the Board of County Commissioners in preparation for today's hearing. And thus, what I had asked of all the sides is that information be provided by September 6th. I had noticed that the Sheriff's Office had provided to me information by September 6th, but I had not heard anything from the union at that point. By the middle of the week, I simply asked the union, I said, hey, if you do have something that you plan to present, I would respectfully request that it be provided so that the board isn't caught off guard or they're at least aware of it, and also the other side, so that every side had been able to see or understand the materials that were going to be presented today and not have it be sort of an ambush or sort of a caught by surprise gotcha meeting. Again, it wasn't Mr. Harpering who had done that. That was me. So if you have any concerns, certainly you can raise that to me.
I'd just like to respond back to it. I'm not talking about the material being provided. What I said was unethical is what was done with that material before it was, or once it was provided. And I do feel like it was totally unethical to take the other side's presentation and shoot holes in it before they even got a chance to present it. Not the fact that it was given, but they gave it in good faith. It was not something that they had to give either. That they're protected by law not to give that to you. So I'm not criticizing the fact that it was given. It's what was done with it after.
And I can tell you, I did provide it to the board ahead of time, so they've seen it before today.
Thank you. I think that concludes the public comment and any questions. It's now up to the board to deliberate. Any comments from any board members?
Mr. Chairman?
We'll begin with Mr. Fisher and just move down the line.
Thank you. I know that Commissioner Bryant said no need for apology, and there truly isn't. But I don't think many people up here want to be here. This should have been resolved and could have been resolved. And we hope in the future that it is resolved and before it gets to this point. I have my own thoughts on that. In other jurisdictions, it goes to circuit court. And with that in mind, when it goes to circuit court, generally, it gets resolved. Well, I don't think there's a perfect solution across the board, Mr. Chairman. In looking at the proposal, the counter-proposal, what the special magistrate has stated, what IUPA has stated, I don't believe that there's a perfect kit, but I believe there's a reason for that. We're trying to address, the sheriff's office is trying to address several broken components at the same time. You can't fix it all. So you have to begin the baseline, and we're reminded that the sheriff's office is in negotiations now for next year, correct? So something is going to be done then, and the following year, we will have a new sheriff as well. The sheriff is retiring. And I have concern for the new sheriff to have to go forward to have to make this work. So we have to give a foundation. Maybe I'm going a little too far forward, but let's get back to what we have offered here. It is true, the starting salary here in Indian River County is not up to par. And we are losing our valuable veterans. I know they do call for letters of reference and recommendations to agencies across this great nation, and they do leave. And we have a limited amount of valuable veterans. There are a few in the room that I worked with, and they're still here, and thank you for your service. But it's very important to have senior individuals with experience and knowledge. After all, we're not talking about any other job, and we can't compare this to any other job across the board. Not to take away from anybody else's occupation, but there's no other occupation at the end of the day where you know that at dinner time, or when you go to work, because you're working that evening shift, that could be your last supper. And I'm not getting emotional on you, because I almost had a funeral that I had to attend to, and it could have been mine. But I attended other funerals. And the bravery, the heroism, and the abilities and the skills that law enforcement offers to the table while we sit here in the comfort of this climate-controlled environment, doing our work for the county, and going home and sleeping and enjoying our families in the umbrella of safety that they provide, accounts for ensuring that their families are okay, that they're okay, that they are content, and that they can justify the separation for 10 or 12 hours from their family and the inherent risk that they take, which can up to and including that ultimate check. It can happen. With that in mind, I look at the special magistrate's offering, suggestion, and in the end, there's one challenge there, that the increase is 4.3%. The other entities have agreed to 5%. The other bargaining units have agreed to 5%. Is it disingenuous? Is it fair to say, well, you're getting the 4.3%, but don't worry about it. We're negotiating, the sheriff's office is negotiating the current contract, and I'm sure there'll be something made up. The water will seek its own level, just stand by. Like what happened when the big bump came about, when Commissioner Lauder had the courage, and that 12% was brought up. You know what? It amounted to about a 4% increase, because there was none for several years prior to that. So, with that, looking at, and I still don't understand the justification at the end for rewarding the senior-most individuals for that bump. I don't understand how we're justifying what could be between $28,000 on the low end up to $60,000 to maintain our valuable veterans, to prevent institutional knowledge, skills, and abilities from leaving this agency. I think that is critical. Over 60% of this agency is less than 3 years on. Young individuals, they're out there. They do need assistance, they do need guidance, they need experience and wisdom and knowledge. Other than supervision, they need the road guidance there with the experience like we had, because they're not all FTOs, but they're FTOs. That's right. Every day is a training day. And when you don't have any seniors out there, you don't have any more training days. And then you begin to lose it. And folks, at 60%, I think we're on the edge of losing it. So with that in mind, I'd like to propose the special magistrate's recommendations, 1, 2, 3, with an increase to 5% on the base salary, 4, 5, and 6.
And is that in the form of a motion?
That is the form of a motion.
We have a motion on the table. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion, please.
We have a second, the motion by Commissioner Flesher, second by discussion for Commissioner Zork. If you're complete at this time, we'll just continue to go down the row, so I'll ask Commissioner O'Brien if he has anything.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank both parties for your professionalism and presentations, and for those in the public that spoke, I appreciate your interest and passion in this issue. Let me start maybe with an easy thing. The magistrate recommendation number 6, moving the top end of the salary. That kind of came out of the blue. I'm not sure how the magistrate arrived at that number. I don't think either side has really had a chance to collective bargain that. So I would recommend that that part of it, that would be part of next year's bargaining things. But I just don't know where that number came from. It's a realistic number. So I was kind of surprised that was in there. So I would like to see that be more thoroughly vetted between both sides in collective bargaining. There was a lot of comments on the retroactivity. This board in the past has voted on several firefighter contracts where there was the option for retroactivity, and I believe in that case it was used as a carrot to get the sides to come together and have an agreement without dragging the process on. And I think that's what the sheriff was trying to do with his November offer that included retroactivity. If we look now, we've gone 9 months now where the sheriff can't recruit at the higher salary. And so when you say we only got one recruit, well, I wonder how many more recruits we might have got if we were able to offer 42,000 at this time. And it's particularly critical because we've now started a new school year and there's a high statewide demand because of the requirement for school resource officers. And without having this contract done and the increased starting salary, I think the Indian River County Sheriff has been handcuffed in trying to recruit to deal with his manpower or man-woman needs. So I don't see it as strong-arming. I look at it as a carrot to get the contract done and in place and get the employees their pay raises in a timely manner. I'm not out of time, am I?
That's coffee. She owes big time for that.
Or pickup.
You know, former County Commissioner Wesley Davis, when we dealt with issues regarding the recession, he always said it's like the rat in the middle of the snake. And eventually it's going to move through and be behind us. And I see that right now with some of the 20-year employees where there was a 5-year period where nobody got pay raises. And I'll say this with no disrespect whatsoever to the men and women of the Sheriff's Department, but that includes all public employees didn't get raises then. Our firefighters did not get raises then. Our Teamsters did not get raises then. And all other county employees did not get raises during those 5 years. So all public employees are facing somewhat of a hole, that rat moving through the snake's stomach because of that Great Recession. And that's just something we're going to have to deal with. And I think if we grant a catch-up to one particular group of public employees, it then puts us in the position of having to grant that same catch-up to all groups of public employees. So it's more than just the dollars would be cost for this particular group. The firefighters would want the same catch-up, the Teamsters, the other employees, and then it becomes a significant cost to try to play catch-up. And then as far as retention, I did some quick math, so it very well could be wrong, but at the $42,000 starting salary and a 4% annual pay increase, a new hire starting today at $42,000 would reach top out or exceed the $63,000 in 11 years. So at that rate, you know, as far as future retention, I think we can point to and compare to the other counties that yes, without this Great Recession, you should reach that top out in 11 years. Those employees that were hired in the last 2 years with the adjustment they will receive, they'll be at top out in 11 more years, so a total of 13, still very competitive. And then finally, I read through the union's written proposals and stuff, and one of the recurring themes was they kept saying that the sheriff's proposals did not provide complete parity. And we saw the graph that yes, the early hires are at 9 and 7.8, and everybody else says it's 5. So the union's position was, well, this was not complete parity, not everybody got the same. But yet the union proposal, if we move the 20-year people up to the top end, is a 5.6 to 8.8% increase, much greater than the majority of the other bargaining unit employees. And yet the union has been here saying, well, that's okay, we prefer that, even though that didn't have complete parity, which was the main theme in their written documents criticizing the sheriff's proposal. So therefore, in thinking about the greatest good for the greatest public interest, neither the sheriff's proposal nor the magistrate's proposal gives complete parity. There is going to be a hiccup there, one way or the other. So then I have to look at what do I think is the greatest public benefit when neither proposal is perfect. Neither proposal has complete parity. So I have the option of, do I go with the sheriff proposal, which will help him recruit new deputies and then be able to reach that top out within 11 years? Or do I go with the union or the magistrate's proposal and give a small minority a disparate pay increase? And looking at the greatest public benefit and realizing that if I have to give one group a catch-up pay increase, I got to do it for all of them, I am not going to be supportive of the motion that's on the floor right now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are my comments.
Thank you very much. I'd like to begin by actually thanking everybody here today for a number of reasons. One, quite frankly, because everybody took this as a business meeting and was very respectful, and in a meeting like this where there is certain tension about this, that is very much appreciated. More importantly, all of you are responsible for what I consider to be a very safe community, all in all. And for me, the litmus test of a safe community is one where my wife can go out and do what she does during the day, and I don't have to worry about where she is because I believe this is a safe community. And for me, that for years has been an incredibly important thing for which I'm very thankful to everyone. That said, I'm going to begin something with Sheriff Raymond's words. And Sheriff Raymond, forgive me for not quoting you exactly right, but as I understand it, when you were talking about the pay issues, you said it was so complex, referring to the pay issues and compression, that it was above my competence and my controller's competence. That is an absolute fact for me. We have an elected constitutional officer with law enforcement experience who is in a much better position to run the agency than I am. And not just with issues like this and with also the fire department, but with a lot of other issues which were outside what I consider to be my bailiwick as a county commissioner, including money to the school board for or other groups to educate preschoolers and kindergartens, which I believed was, according to the Florida Constitution, in the bailiwick of the school board. I believe that we need to keep as much of a focus on those items that we're actually charged with, or else we're going to make more and more bad decisions. So importantly, as has been referred to, we are actually coming up to an election. And I believe that it's the citizens who ought to be in the best place to decide issues like this. And quite frankly, if this makes a good election issue, that's great. I think that both sides ought to be trying to inform the public as much as possible and elect somebody then who will fulfill the public's vision and basically recommendation. So I think that in our democratic system is the best way to go. So I've long held it to be in the best interests of our community, which would include the interest of our public employees, to basically allow the elected constitutional officer to determine how the agency's going to be run, and that will inform my vote today. Commissioner Adams.
I don't have anything at this time.
Commissioner Zork.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, looking back and reflecting on those periods from when the budget consequences started coming through in the 2009 through 2015-16, the county laid off literally a few hundred workers, but not one from law enforcement or emergency services, because we knew those are essential services. So there were tough choices made before my time, but those were, would you rather have the job you have without a raise or have no job at all? It's a very difficult spot to be in. Also, the starting pay on recruiting, that's got to be extremely difficult when you're not just our surrounding areas, but if you throw in the whole state, you have to have a more competitive edge from a price point. When somebody's just coming out of school or out of the academy, you know, a lot of them are just looking at the bottom line. Where can I go? What's my cost of living? I think some of these agencies have to pay a lot more because their cost of living in those areas are a lot more, but we still need to be competitive so that we're on the radar for those young recruits that are coming out. This is it's a difficult decision and a balancing act for both sides. It's been long. It would have been great if it had been resolved prior. And I, too, don't take the sheriff's comments personally as a strong arm side. If you don't take an offer that has a raise in it, the only consequence to not taking it is an economic consequence. So I don't personally read it that way, but I see how somebody could look at it that way. If there's an offer on the table that has a raise in it, you don't take it, that is an economic consequence. So I don't take that per se in such a negative light per se. But I did second the motion, and it's a balancing act of all sides. And I'm one of 5, so we'll see where it goes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Zork. If there's, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to point out that the proposal, the motion on the table would seem to be a higher cost than what the sheriff's proposal was. I don't know by how much, so there could be some funding impact of that. I don't know if that's something that the sheriff would be able to absorb in his existing budget, or there could be some impact on next year's budget.
I tend to think, just my own view, that if we do something today which increases the budget, we can't put that burden on the sheriff. That's something we are responsible for injecting ourselves into his business.
Okay, thank you.
And that's just my view. But
I agree, but I don't think we injected ourselves.
well, I mean, at this point, by the way we vote. Anything else that anybody wants to say before we take the vote? There's a motion on the table by Commissioner Fleischer to, if you would repeat it, Commissioner, because you specifically mentioned a number of provisions, and I just want everybody to get them down correctly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to propose to accept of the special magistrate's recommendation, item number 1, intact at the starting rate of $42,000. Item number 2, which has several stipulations on the starting pay and the timing of the hire. Item number 3, I requested to bump that to 5% to be comparative with the other bargaining units that have already agreed to the proposal. Item number 4, intact. Regarding the top salary. Item number 5, again, the 20 years experience, annual salary to $63,151 at the top end. And item number 6, which is those bargaining unit members who were at the top end of the pay grade, $63,151, shall be moved to the new top salary of $65,867.
Thank you. And that was your second, Commissioner Zork.
Yes, sir.
And Mr. Reingold, the motion is clear to you.
Yes, I just want to clarify, there is retroactivity in that motion, sir?
Most certainly,
That's okay, just want to make
as
sure.
suggested by the magistrate.
Very good. The motion is, I think at this point, fairly clear, made by Commissioner Fleischer, seconded by Commissioner Zork. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Nay. Motion fails 2-3. Commissioners Adams, Solari, and O'Brien voting against the motion. Now, do we need an affirmative motion to find for the sheriff?
There could be an alternative motion, there could be accepting the sheriff's motion, there could be another sort of combined motion. Welcome any motions from the floor.
Do we have a?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we accept the sheriff's recommendation as presented in his July 8th, 2019 letter to the board. If you like, I can really read the highlights, but it's basically the sheriff's proposal.
Fine, and you consider that to be in the public, is being in the public interest, including the interest of the public employees involved, to resolve all disputed impasse issues as part of your motion?
Yes, as I stated earlier, I think, looking at all the public employees, that this is the position I think I will support.
And as that's part of your motion, I'll be happy to second it. Any comments on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
And Commissioner Adams, you were for then. Motion passes 3-2. Commissioners Fletcher and Zork voting against. I will just finally like to note that all the materials from both sides have been made part of the record, and the clerk should have them, so that's been done. And again, I'd like to thank everybody who came here tonight. And yes, Commissioner.
Just one quick question for the parties. I understand under the statute that the parties then will reduce in writing this to, as part of the agreement. I guess this is part of the wage November 2018 writing that you had presented. Okay, just want to make sure parties were aware of that. Okay, I'm seeing concurrence from Mr. Burton.
And with that, we are adjourned.